first, get the point stuff out of the way, and then you guys can see Sesame Street. So mine's called Reading Sesame Street. It's a study of literary structures in children's educational television, obviously specifically Sesame Street. And really what I wanted to do was two things. I chose Sesame Street because of its structure. It has these very set narrative sketches that last 5 to 15 minutes, not very long. And it has a full arc as opposed to something like Blue's Clues where it's a half-hour arc. So you can get a lot of different narratives in one episode. That also makes it similar to a classroom where you have lesson plans, and because I'm an early childhood education person, I'm studying to be a teacher, it was interesting for me to look at that. I chose Sesame Street because I grew up with it, as I'm sure many who watched Sesame Street as a kid. Yeah, all right. It's a cultural institution in our country. 8 million children watch it every week. It's won more Emmys than any other show in history. It also gets exported to 120 different countries. 32 countries have their own versions in cooperation with Sesame Workshop. So there's one in Israel, there's one in South Africa, and they get to use the Sesame Street format to fit their cultural needs. I also, as I said, because of the structure, it's also, surprisingly, the most studied form of children's education in the history of the science, I guess. But it's never, at least that I found, it's never been studied as literature. Even though it has all the structures of literature, it has plot, it has characters, it has a narrative form. And so I decided that I would do that, and hopefully it would be interesting. In order to do that, I had to establish that Sesame Street could, in fact, be a text. So I used Roland Barthes' definition, which treats text as an interaction. And you can, he says that we gather text up as play when we interact with it, that there's a back and forth between the reader and the text. And so that's exactly how children interact with Sesame Street. A, because the kids, they want to interact. B, because it's educational, so they're supposed to interact. And so it really falls into Barthes' definition. I'm going to focus mainly on the character structures for this part. I studied the plot structures as well. There's a whole reader response chapter, which I'll cover briefly. But I'm mostly going to focus on the characters because I love them and I bet you guys love them too. The first are the adults. I studied Gordon and Maria, if you guys remember them. They are two adult characters on the show. And they are what's considered high mimetic characters. Maria Nicola-Veja is a scholar who identifies 3 different types of characters in any children's literature. That's high mimetic, low mimetic, and ironic. The adults are high mimetic because they're superior to the viewer in intelligence, bravery, courage, all those things. And using that superiority, they can then guide the reader through whatever objective the narrative is trying to express. The children are represented on the show as the Muppets. The Muppets are usually, not all of them, but are usually younger than 6, and so they represent the psychological age of the children. So when the adults use their high mimetic powers to guide the Muppets through the show, they're also guiding the children at home through the show. The adults also come in and act as deus ex machinas whenever possible. But deus ex machina is something that comes into the narrative and plot to fix an insolvable situation. So for example, there's one scene where Elmo, Baby Bear, Telly, and Zoe are all arguing over who has the best pet. And they go back and forth and back and forth, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And then there's just explosion. There's just rambling, you can't hear what anybody's saying, and Maria steps right in and immediately, with like 2 lines of dialogue, resolves everything. They love each other. And that's not normal. Like, if you've ever tried to get 2 kids to stop arguing, it's not like that. They will, but he did this, and he did this, and she did that, and she did that, and it just goes back and forth. But Maria, because she can act as a deus ex machina, comes in and says, hey, this is the way it is, and they all go, all right, we're best friends, perfect. And the plot can resolve itself, and they can move on. Elmo is an example of the low mimetic character. As I said, almost all the Muppets are low mimetic because they represent the psychological age. Elmo is specifically written to be a 3-year-old, which is kind of the core demographic of the show. He basically, the reason, and here's, I studied Elmo as opposed to the other Muppets because it's just so popular. Like, everyone knows Elmo around the world. He is the ultimate Muppet to a lot of kids. He surpasses Kermit, if you can believe And it's because he has all the tendencies to fail that other kids experience. Like, he constantly struggles with basic concepts, which I watched a lot of Elmo's work with his eyes. It's really frustrating to watch Elmo struggle with just the simplest thing. It takes him 20 minutes, and then it's like, all right, kid. But you gotta be patient with him, he's only 3. And so children identify with that struggle. Michael Davis, he wrote a history of Sesame Street called Street Gang, and he actually says, I have a quote right here, Elmo is so ubiquitous and inescapable that newborns seem to emerge from the womb with an Elmo doll attached to their umbilical cord, which is absolutely true. They love him, and it's because of that vulnerability, and it's because Elmo loves them unconditionally, and so children are drawn in and identify with the struggle, and then stick with him because they know that he's going to love them back forever, as cute as that may sound. He becomes what one researcher calls socially relevant. They actually did a study where they taught 2 different groups of students the same thing. One group got taught using an Elmo puppet. The other group got taught using a dodo puppet. It's just this, I think he's Taiwanese, but children in America had never heard of him. The children who got taught by Elmo learned it overwhelmingly better than the children that got taught by Dodo, and it's because it was Elmo, because they could relate with him, and so immediately they had that connection and they were able to express that more clearly. Oscar. Oscar is the closest thing that Sesame Street comes to an ironic character. An ironic character is one that is inferior to the viewer, or to the reader in this case, because I am studying as a text, to the reader in every aspect. And so Oscar is not necessarily inferior, but he is stagnant as a character. You will never see a sketch with Oscar where he starts off one way and ends a different way. There is no personal development with Oscar. He's gonna be grouchy. He loves being grouchy, which you might think would like make him grow, but then he hates that he loves it and goes back to being grouchy, and so it's just this big cycle with him. So he's the closest that they come to an ironic character. And his negativity on the show is actually a really important thing because it balances the positivity of the other characters and then makes them defend that positivity. So on a show like Barney, no one's negative. Everyone's positive, but no one questions why they're positive, so there's no real growth there. You don't have to defend why you're happy. Whereas everyone's happy on Sesame Street, Oscar comes in, kind of like poops all over the whole thing, and then they have to question, okay, well, why were we happy in the first place? Why were we defending this principle of goodness? They have to defend themselves against Oscar, and in that way, the show becomes stronger, and those characters are able to develop. Oscar also, he does this thing where he comes into a narrative simply to force another character into action, and he usually drags them down for a second, which creates a narrative struggle. If you really think that Elmo is going to suddenly become just depressing, you don't want that to happen, so you root for the narrative to resolve itself, and so Oscar kind of becomes the foil in that narrative. So this, like I said, there was a chapter on reader response in which I used Wolfgang Heiser's implied reader theory. It's an overarching, very big theory. The implied reader is, of all the reader response, the one that most closely associates with the way that children interact with the show, and that's because it's active, like I said earlier. I got written this up. Children interact with the show, and that's what makes that tension. And the implied reader, in order for that to happen, the text has to have three different qualities. It has to be novel, which is obviously represented by the Muppets. You've never seen anything like the Muppets in real life, and so they become the novelty that draws you in, but they're also familiar. So like Big Bird may look like a huge giant bird that you've never seen, but he acts like a 6-year-old, and so he's that familiar kind of novelty. 4 perspectives, we'll skip that. Structured acts. Within each narrative, because the author can never know who they're talking to, they have to create these layers of emotional and behavioral kind of variables so that children, no matter what their experience, can identify with it. But because children have such a limited experience with life, there creates this tension which is loosened because the child is willing to accept the reality of the show. That they haven't experienced as much as we have, so we can read something and go, well, that's not my experience, and throw it away, and that's an unsuccessful interaction. Whereas a child can be like, well, I don't know what's going on. Sesame Street says it's this way, I'll accept that. And so the tension is kind of loosened, which raises all kinds of questions about susceptibility to the show and what we're teaching our children. But I'm going to get to the skit. So if I could have Katie Martin get into a wardrobe, Matthew Bowerly, I need to borrow your glasses. Someone who has those up to me. I need them for my character. So what you need to know is, it'll break. So hold on. So what you need to know is, Katie Markovich's Cookie Monster. I am Cookie Monster's mother. All right. And the letter of the, that's a cookie. And the letter of the day is L. So I give you Cookie Monster and the letter L.
Hi there! Cookie Monster here, and we want to talk to you today about letter L. Yeah, letter L. Make the L sound. L. Make L. Yeah. And letter L, oh, look like this. It can have one line going this way and one line going that way. Yeah, that's all. Only 2 lines. One letter L is a very important letter. It's first letter in word look. And word listen. Oh. And word lollipop. Oh, me just love letter L. Hey! Love starts with the letter L. Yeah, love. Me love letter L, and me love all letters really, and me love cookies, of course, and what else do me love?
Hello, son.
Oh, Mommy, me was telling these people all about letter L.
Oh, that's very important job, son.
Tell me about it, Mommy. Me talk about L, what L look like, and the words that start with letter L. Then me tell them all the things me love, because love starts with letter L.
Oh, what you tell them you love?
Well, he said me love letter L, and all letters, and cookies!
Oh. That's a very nice list, son.
But me not tell them what we love most of all.
And what that?
Me love you, Mommy.
That made me so happy! Know what?
What?
Me love you too.
Oh, Mommy. Mommy, me love you so much, me want to give you something special.
What's that?
Me want to give you letter of day cookie.
That is so nice, son. Me love you so much, me want to give you something special as well.
Oh, boy. What's that, Mommy?
Me want to give you half of this letter of day cookie.
Really?